中国这现状有很多他不满意的地方。但是你老说中国现在这么好，他看着你就有点不顺眼。
不是，因为今天中国是个老国家啊，历史的国家，但是新的国家，是一个新的国家，才60年。
新中国嘛，
新中国前30年都对外，给多少人在欺负，有10年的什么大灾难，有什么，是真正的成功是这10几年呢。我们自己国家的祖师也承认他们自己有腐败，有什么，我们在改进。我是看见我们国家在不断的改进，不断的在学习。你讲贪污，全世界美国有没有贪污？
美国，
世界最大的贪污
是吗？
当然，搞得世界大崩溃是什么来的？就是世界，就是美国那边开始的。我在美国接受访问，人家问我，我也是这么讲。现在我们中国强盛，所有人都拿我们中国来做问题，我们自己人都不支持自己的国家，谁支持自己的国家？我们知道我们自己国家很多问题，我们关起来讲，对外我们国家是最好的。
You've been keeping track of what the CIA and the Defense Department have been doing for a long time as far as using us as guinea pigs for mind control and other types of horrible things they have in mind for us and the rest of the people in the world. What are some of them?
Well, it started out basically with the CIA doing experimentations on their own men to discover if they could get rid of agents who were going to quit the department and still had classified information. So they utilized different types of drugs and pain and hypnosis and electric shock to try and get the guys to forget. Then they also did experimentations to using different chemicals to see if you can induce a person to commit a crime or induce him to do that or to do this. Of course, the CIA claimed that it didn't carry it through. The documentation we got was actually that they did that. Then we came across the overall project called MK Ultra. Its earlier code name was Artichoke, and that included 149 sub-projects.
149.
Yeah. And those sub-projects range from what I just described to open-air testing in the United States, experimentation on prisoners, experimentation on soldiers, experimentation on college students.
Would these people know they were being experimented on and gave their approval?
No, except for the quote-unquote voluntary Army soldiers.
Oh, yeah.
And the way the voluntary Army program worked is it started in 1959, and the guys were just told that they would be doing experimentation on new weapons, right? And then they'd get to Fort Detrick, Maryland, where the experimentation was done, and find out that they were going to be doing it on drugs and chemicals. But they were never told what they would be experimented on. You know, they just knew that they went crazy for a couple of days or so forth and so on, and then years later have similar things to the guys who have had Agent Orange, because there's one chemical that was used called BZ, and it's 100 times stronger than LSD. It's a very gross drug that causes a person to totally go out of his head for at least 12 hours, sometimes up to 2 to 3 weeks, where he doesn't even know where he is or who he is.
Are there residual effects to BZ?
Yes. Now, the Army at first said that they'd done testing to discover it, and they said there weren't any residual results.
It's harmless. It's harmless. They always say that.
Right. And we did a campaign to find the soldiers who had been experimented on, and we found approximately 40 in the U.S., all of which have been experiencing extreme emotional and physical upset since that time. You know, with children with birth defects, the same sort of thing as Agent Orange. But the Army, as part of the CIA's experimentations, wanted to simulate chemical biological warfare attacks and to see what effect it would have on different Americans, how far it could go in, and so forth, and also test to see how they could use it on other countries. The different kinds of things that they did without the citizens' permission anytime on any of these tests was...
Or even knowing about it.
Oh, no.
Right.
Of course not. You know, they didn't even say they were going to do a test, you know. They experimented with the use of mosquitoes, where they just let tons of mosquitoes go in South Carolina, and just to test how far the mosquitoes would go, because they had the idea that maybe if they used a particular strain of mosquitoes in, say, Soviet Russia, then those guys aren't immune to yellow fever because they don't have yellow fever there. Then Russia could be infected with an epidemic of yellow fever. But our guys were tested on it. Not the Russians were tested on it. We were tested on it.
What other types of things did they drop in the air?
They dropped a particular bacterium called, I can't pronounce it real well, it's whatever, and it was used, and I'm sure that most people have heard of it, in San Francisco, where at least 10 people got sick from it and 1 died. In fact, Edward Nevin III is suing the Army currently because of his father who died from it. Now that chemical was also utilized in Florida, and it's a bacteria that causes a pneumonia-type disease, you know, respiratory problems and things like that. So that was tested in San Francisco and in Florida. Then they also used other chemicals that they've not released what they are yet. In New York, they released it in subways and in tunnels and in turnpikes in 1965 and 1956 and 1966 in 2 different tests. Then the major thing that they used after that was zinc cadmium sulfide, which the Army spokesmen have again said is harmless. But the only scientific studies that we've come up with says that it could be very harmful. In fact, if a person is exposed to it continuously, it could cause death. But it would definitely cause anyone with respiratory problems to get it agitated to a degree that they would either get very, very sick or they could actually die.
Well, they've used Texas and Texans as guinea pigs for a long time, haven't they?
Yes, and that's zinc cadmium sulfide. Now that was done in what we've documented in at least 15 different locations in the U.S., one of which was in Dallas in 1961. A series of 34 different tests were done off a TV tower where they blew it out to a very large area, and the whole test area went from Dallas all the way down to Killeen, Texas, which is a long way. It's like 160 miles.
Well, Austin's been involved in one of these tests too, hasn't it?
Right. The other series of tests that we discovered with zinc cadmium sulfide was in the test area was described as from Corpus Christi up to San Antonio, Austin, and over to Houston. So it was that area. And they sprayed off jet bombers the zinc cadmium sulfide by following the coastline, and then it would blow in to the coast. And then they set up samplers to see the concentration and how far it would go in. That was done in 1965 in that area. Then a year later, they did a similar type test, but this time the simulant used was 23 tons of glass beads and cork particles.
Glass beads and cork particles, and we inhaled these?
Yeah, yeah. Now those wouldn't be as dangerous as zinc cadmium sulfide, but I don't think I'd want to breathe 23 tons of glass beads. No. So, and again, the thing is, now with these tests, we are currently trying to get Texas senators at least. We've given a submission to Senator Tower and Benson and Pickle to ask them to please put a ban on any chemical biological warfare testing without anyone's permission, so that if a city wants to, you know, be utilized as a guinea pig, then they have the ability to say whether they want it or not. I mean, it's just not okay for Dallas to get sprayed and everyone in the city get that effect without their permission, and so we are trying currently to get a ban on this.
What about the certain types of testing of strictly racial or ethnic nature? Well,
we discovered that actually they phrased it as is ethnic weapons. Now, in the United States, we've been able to document that Negro men were experimented on with LSD and other hallucinogenics who were either mental patients or prisoners. And the attempt with that is to discover how different ethnic groups or races would not be as immune to something as someone else. Like as with Soviet Russia, they don't have yellow fever. So those guys hadn't built up an immunity to yellow fever yet. So if you used a particular chemical in that area, then say Russians may not have that immunity and might get an epidemic that's real quick and then disable the country immediately.
That reminds me back in the old days, the good old days, when the Army and all used to give the smallpox infected blankets to the Indians.
Right.
We haven't really changed much, have we? Except we've gone on a mass-produced basis and have the ability to spread it throughout the whole world.
Well, the irresponsibility with it is what is a terrible thing, because the Army apparently felt like some of the guys are good guys, and they really probably felt that we need to do chemical biological warfare tests to make sure we don't get attacked on this. I mean, what if Russia came over here and did a chemical, you know, sprayed a chemical in the United States? What would happen? But who was responsible for telling the Army that that chemical was safe? I mean, that has never been in any of the documentation. Who was responsible for saying that BZ, which is an extremely dangerous drug, could be used on our soldiers? Who said it was okay to use Agent Orange and that it was harmless? You know, those guys cannot be found. They're not in the documentation. You can find out about all the tests, and then, of course, you go to the Army because the Army conducted the tests. But who in the Army said it was okay? And that's what I think is the thing that must be found out, because those individuals, I think, should be prosecuted. It was a criminal. It was a criminal thing. It shouldn't have been done.
So unbelievable, we didn't think it could possibly be true. But after receiving thousands of records and declassified reports from the Army, it's confirmed that during the Cold War, the United States military conducted secret tests on unsuspecting people in the city of St. Louis. A local sociologist will make her findings public tomorrow, but she spoke first to the I-Team's Lisa Zigman.
Lisa Martino-Taylor's life work has been to uncover details of the Army's ultra-secret military experiments carried out in St. Louis and other cities during the 1950s and 60s.
This study was secretive for a reason. They didn't have volunteers stepping up and saying, yeah, I'll breathe zinc cadmium sulfide with radioactive particles.
These Army archive pictures show how the tests were done in Corpus Christi, Texas in the 1960s. In Texas, planes were used to drop the chemical, but in St. Louis, the Army placed chemical sprayers on buildings and station wagons. City officials were kept in the dark about the tests. The Cold War cover story was that the Army was testing smoke screens to protect cities from a Russian attack. The truth, according to Martino-Taylor, was much more sinister.
It's pretty shocking. The level of duplicity and secrecy, clearly they went to great lengths to deceive people.
By making hundreds of Freedom of Information Act requests, she uncovered once classified documents that confirmed the spraying of zinc cadmium sulfide. The greatest concentration of this compound was sprayed near the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex just south of downtown St. Louis. It was home to 10,000 low-income people, and an estimated 70% were under the age of 12. Martino-Taylor claims they all unknowingly inhaled this compound morning, noon, and night, so the government could measure its effects on their lungs.
So this was in violation of all medical ethics, all international codes, and the military's own policy at that time.
In 1994, then Congressman Richard Gephardt asked the Army to open its records and explain the St. Louis testing.
We want to make very sure that nothing went on that would harm anyone and that all the facts are out on the table.
Documents released in the 90s show the Army placed sprayers on this former Knights of Columbus building on Lindell and in Forest Park. The Army always insisted the chemical compound was safe. Martino-Taylor believes documents prove otherwise.
There's a lot of evidence that indicates that people in St. Louis, in the city, particularly in minority communities, were subjected to military tests that was connected to a larger radiological weapons development and testing project.
For the first time, she links the St. Louis testing to a company called U.S. Radium, a company notorious for lawsuits involving radioactive contamination of its workers.
United States Radium had this reputation where they had been found legally liable decades prior for producing a radioactive powdered paint that killed many young women who painted fluorescent watch dials.
While the Army admits it added a fluorescent substance to the zinc-cadmium compound, details of whether it was radioactive remain secret. Documents uncovered to date indicate the Army never conducted follow-up studies to see whether the compound caused long-term health issues. In 1972, after years of crime, poverty, and decline, the government destroyed the Pruitt-Igoe housing complex. Lisa Zigman, News Channel 5, I-Team.
Now, the company U.S. Radium no longer exists. Martino-Taylor has placed all of her research, including the declassified documents, online and we'll link you to that data at ksdk.com. Now, she will make all of her findings public tomorrow at St. Louis Community College Merrimack campus. In the meantime, if you remember the spraying, the I-Team's Lisa Zigman would like to hear from you. You can email her at lzigman@ksdk.
When I saw the State of the Black Union, Dick Gregory really moved me and a lot of my friends. I show it to everybody that comes over the house, especially white folks, because they need to hear that, you know, so that they know more about all of us. Because what he said affects all of us. He said something that really hit home about this phenomena of chemtrails. And, you know, when I was a kid, I used to see these trails in the sky all the time. And so, oh, that's cool. A jet just went over. And then you started to see a whole bunch of them. And the next thing you know, everybody in your neighborhood was fighting and arguing, and you didn't know why. Okay? And you really didn't know why. I mean, everybody was fighting. So he started riffing about the chemtrails. And he started to say things that hit home so hard. And I would recommend that everybody try to get what he said online or wherever and try to get a copy of it and just listen to it. Because I was so moved that I had to write the song.
And then when you leave, with all the hassle, can you have that love? Love. I'm so tired of you black folk walking around looking all evil like that's going to change something. Looking all mean and talking all crazy. Let them tell you about your children. If I sit here today, and these are all white folks, and they're putting some sleeping pill in my water, and I sit up here and doze off and go to sleep, and everybody told in the world, niggas is lazy. They tired. No, that's because you too naive enough to know what they putting in my water. Okay? Your children ain't violent because they black. They ain't violent. Most people in the world live in a ghetto. They don't kill people. What are you putting in my malt liquor, white boy? What are you putting in? Huh? Hear me. And it's your fault too. Malt liquor is made by white companies, but only sold in black neighborhoods, and you ain't checked it to see what's in it. Huh? How much lead are you putting in my neighborhood? Lead affects my thinking capacity. Lead is only one thing on the planet more dangerous than lead, and that's manganese. Manganese will make you kill your mama. And let me tell y'all something. If you want to see the largest homicide rate in the world, it ain't in no black ghetto in America. It's a little town in Australia where them white folks' homicide rate is 200 times what their population is. And that town just happened to be located across the street from a manganese plant. Right here.
Sit back down, Dick. Don't lose that mic. Yeah.
That town is located across the street from a manganese plant. How much manganese are you spraying in my neighborhood at night while I'm asleep? How in the world can a 9-year-old child find a heroin man, but the FBI can't find it, and you gonna tell me that's a black thing? Y'all crazy? What is this about? These are the things that need to change while this brother and sisters on their way to the White House. And when you see Hillary and y'all see Brother Barack, thank him for me. And you white folks need to be thankful. Because if y'all had a brother like me, y'all would really be in trouble. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Okay?
Ladies and gentlemen, Dick Gregory. Dick Gregory. Dick Gregory.
I was so moved that I had to write the song. The other thing is the first line of the song says I was born on the same plantation in the United States of the red, white, and blue. And we live in a place now that feels just about like a plantation. We're all indentured servants, you know. When I found out there were 8 presidents before George Washington, I wanted to smack somebody. You know, I wanted to know why I was taught otherwise. Just tell me the whole story. I'll fill in the blanks, but don't, you know, don't tell me something that you think I'm supposed to know.
We're indentured servants and we got a black president now?
Well, I don't vote. I have nothing to do with it. I got no dog in that race.
And for those who would cuss me out and slap me in person if I didn't ask you why?
Well, the reason why is because I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and we've never voted. And that's not to say that I don't think Barack Obama, President Obama, is a very smart individual, and he seems like he means well. Prophecy is what we all have to go by now.
But see, people talk reparation. All right. I could get killed for this, but I'm going to say it. It ain't even funny either. It's definitely not going to be funny to white people. Or Latinos, or Asians, or Jews, anybody. Here's what reparations should be, simple. Because look, we are all slaves right now. We work so that we can pay a debt to the bank that the government got money from. That they're borrowing not on our behalf. So we are paying someone else's debt. So we are slaves to the government, who is a slave to the bank. Okay? I think black people, as reparations, we can't get a pocket full of money. It makes no sense. Because niggas is just gonna... But here's what we do. Because here's what black people are trying to do. To create wealth, like to become a wealthy people. Even though they'll be poor, there'll be some that are super wealthy. Like Oprah has a lot of money, but she ain't wealthy because it ain't from no tradition shit. She just lucky. So that's why she hanging on to that shit. Like she used to support Obama outwardly, but she did that shit, and all those white women that love her said, I don't like you supporting this nigga so loudly, Oprah. So she quiet a little bit. But here's the reparations. I'm gonna back up. Since federal income tax is slavery, and we are all slaves, and reparations is an apology for slavery, the original slavery that we're talking about, black people should be exempt from federal income tax. Make sure a white boy, he didn't like that shit. He started biting his top lip. Because if you understand money, you shoot me in the head just for even thinking that shit. Because what that'll do, it'll cause wealth. Here to do. The people who are going to do what they were going to do with the 100,000 that we would all get are still going to do that. Oh shit! Got more money! More sneakers, nigga! But the ones that understand money gonna take that shit and create wealth. But it ain't gonna happen. But that's my reparation idea. We all already have been slaves. Federal income tax is slavery. So I'm just saying, we're double slaves. They let us have enough to pay for our fucking plantation hut that we live in, that they always threatening to take. We're gonna take your shit. Why? I've worked so hard. Why? They gonna do this? That's everybody. White people too. Why?
Hi, I'm Michael Moynihan for Reason TV, and today we are at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum with Steve Lookert, the curator of State of Deception, the Power of Nazi Propaganda.
We wanted to examine the role of Nazi propaganda, how they used it to facilitate persecution, mass murder, and war. When you think about how quick that Nazi rise to power was, that for most of the period of the Weimar Republic, the Nazi Party was largely a joke.
Ich habe mir ein Ziel gesteckt, nämlich die 30 Parteien aus Deutschland hinauszufegen.
1928, the Nazi Party only had 12 seats in the German parliament out of almost 600. But 1930 gets 107 seats. Then 1932, it more than doubles that. They learned how to simplify a message, how to play upon voters' emotions, how to reduce very complicated issues to slogans. This is a Braille copy of Mein Kampf.
A Braille copy of Mein Kampf, contemporaneously. Were people reading this?
Yeah, particularly those that were the propagandists. This was kind of the Bible for them, that they would draw on what was said in there. And of course, excerpts from Mein Kampf were used everywhere to justify various policies. But this became a bestseller, and Hitler made a fortune off the royalties from this. And it was published in, I think, 16, 17 different languages. These posters inform us a great deal about Nazi thinking and the ways in which they presented images to the public, whether it's of this kind of strong, heroic figure breaking the chains of slavery, this playing upon dissatisfaction with the status quo, the ways in which they engaged in what today we would call niche marketing. So it's women who work in the home, farmers, workers. Don't tend to associate the Nazis with the word freedom, but they used it endlessly.
What was the sort of methodology behind choosing these bright red colors?
Hitler talked about how in the early 20s he would create posters for his meetings in red because he understood the way it could provoke people, that it was a way to engage an audience to get them into those beer halls.
So are they consciously drawing from the Bolshevik example?
I mean, when Goebbels talked about the power of film, one of the films that he always cited was Battleship Potemkin.
What's happening now after 1933, 1934?
The Nazis saw the importance of controlling the media, this Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda. It was created as a cabinet-level post for Joseph Goebbels, who also was in charge of the Nazi Party's propaganda apparatus.
So in the state, this means newsreels, films, books, radio, libraries. Here we have the big political show of National Socialists. The two attacks on Jews as both being capitalists and communists and Bolsheviks, confused and silly, but apparently effective. So how does one prepare the population for this kind of machinery of destruction?
There is an effort made to both present the Jews as a real physical threat to Germany, and also to identify Jews as being the powers behind the enemy. They would show these Soviet atrocities against the local population, and then identify the Jews as the perpetrators of that. In this particular poster, dealing with the discovery of a Soviet crime in Vinica, to identify the Jewish Bolshevik as the perpetrator of that crime.
Is this the original painting?
Yes.
It is?
Yeah. Now, the title comes from the New Testament book of John, but instead of having Jesus as a messianic figure, we have Adolf Hitler. And you can see in the painting the way the light emanates off Adolf Hitler's face over the audience. The audience is portrayed as a kind of a microcosm of German society, but it also emphasizes the importance that Hitler and the Nazis placed on the spoken word. That Adolf Hitler believed that the spoken word, far more than the written word, was responsible for all the great events in history. It allowed you direct contact with your audience. That is, you could play upon their hopes, fears, and frustrations. You could get immediate feedback about what worked and what didn't work, and all that became important as you tailored your message.
How do you see this as relevant to today? I mean, what does this tell us about today's political propaganda, if anything?
An exhibition like this raises questions about how we address propaganda. Is it through restricting speech, or is it more of the American marketplace of ideas that is the best way to address what one might consider offensive speech? And also, how to evaluate all the information that we're bombarded with today, and how to make educated, informed decisions.
Arnon Milchin is probably one of the most famous Israeli Americans due to the fact that he produced some of the biggest Hollywood blockbusters, including Pretty Woman, Fight Club, and LA Confidential. Forbes magazine has placed him as the 37th most wealthiest Jew in the world. But it seems that Milchin has a dark secret he has kept for many years. In an exclusive TV interview to Ilana Dayan on her investigative show Uvda, which means fact in Hebrew, she has gotten him to admit for the first time on record about his secretive and sometimes illegal involvement on behalf of the Israeli government.
Anything back then? I had heard, but I wasn't sure.
The Ilana Dayan expose has gone viral even before the official air date of the show, something that Dayan says is not really that surprising.
In a way, it's not really surprising. You have a mega producer, you have mega Hollywood stars, you have this sexy, glamorous environment, you have this clandestine world, you have nuclear triggers. It's really all the ingredients one needs to make a hell of a story. So it's really not surprising. I am not sure what he had in mind. He didn't make any conditions. He didn't make any reservations. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't take any breaks. I asked whatever I wanted. He answered whatever he wanted. But I think in the bottom line, what he wanted is for people in this country to know what he did for them overseas.
Do you know what it's like to be a kid of 20-something whose country lets him be James Bond?
For many years, rumors have surrounded what Arnon Milchin actually did on behalf of the Israeli government. But now, explains Dayan, it's all out in the open.
It's amazing when you understand that he was only 20-something and the state of Israel gets into one of the weirdest and darkest alliances it ever made with South Africa. The apartheid regime was at its worst, but the South Africans offered Israel uranium for Dimona. In exchange, Israel promised to embark on an amazing, unprecedented international PR campaign to put a nice face on apartheid. And who better for the job? Who is better for the job than Arnon Milchin? And he's the one designated by Shimon Peres to go to South Africa and to embark on that public relations affair. Hundreds of millions of dollars Milchin admits to have received on behalf of the State of Israel from the South Africans to buy television stations. It was even contemplated to buy the Observer, the Express. He's speaking on it on camera. I was amazed because, you know, for many years people have spoken about it, have heard about it. It was kind of rumored, but I didn't really imagine him coming on camera and confessing.
Uvda has followed Milchin on and off for over a year, and then one moment, like a catharsis waiting to explode, it all came out, admits Dayan, who was with him on his private jet en route to the set of his newest flick.
It's very evident in retrospect that it was in there, it was in him, it was waiting to burst out. It is very evident. 2 minutes before landing, all of a sudden it comes out. I did it. I did it for Israel. Because people in Hollywood always kind of held it against me, and I kept defending myself, and I kept apologizing, and I kept evading the questions, and now I want to say it out loud. And I think it has to do with age, it has to do with success, it has to do with the fact that nobody can really harm him today. He's wealthy enough, he's successful enough, he's powerful enough. Who cares?
It's no secret that Milchin is one of the most important movers and shakers in Hollywood. However, being there with him when it happens is very overwhelming, says Diane.
First of all, it was a hell of a ride. I mean, the guy arranged for us to meet David Fincher, Ben Affleck, Warren Beatty, Jennifer McConnelly, Russell Crowe, Robert De Niro, you name it. Some of them, by the way, surprise us and him in terms of what they say. And yes, it's evident that many of them either heard or knew or saw something, and it's especially particularly interesting to watch De Niro answer these questions, because when Milchin was in the midst of the biggest drama of his life, when one of the shipments of nuclear triggers for Israel went wrong, this was the time in which he was filming Once Upon a Time in America. He was dying for De Niro to take the leading role. And De Niro sits with us in his upstate New York mansion, and he says, I heard something about these little triggers of nuclear something, but I didn't ask him much about it. He knew that Milchin is undergoing really the biggest drama of his life. The guy that really, I think, puts it in place is Tom Rothman, the ex-chairman of Fox. And I asked him, didn't it ever raise an eyebrow in this town in terms of dual loyalty? And he says, you know what? In this town, there's one loyalty, one religion, one God. Make hits, bring profits. That's the only thing that matters in Hollywood.
A little-known fact is that although Milchin has been living in the U.S. since the 80s, he has never given up his Israeli citizenship, nor has he become an American citizen. He is avidly devoted to Israel and has convinced many of the Hollywood A-listers he works with to endorse the Jewish state publicly. For Jane 1, I'm Ron Jacobson in Tel Aviv.
I think, in one sense, it's kind of like emotional, you know, and if you don't have no way to channel that emotion, you know, it's not a good thing. I mean, I love the action and all that, and you know, all this. I didn't see 12 Years a Slave and stuff. I really have to think about it, because I've seen, I think about a month and a half ago and stuff, Arnon Milchin. You know, you familiar with him? He's a Hollywood producer. And he had something to do with 12 Years a Slave too. I know Steve McQueen that did it and stuff, but then he had his, I guess it's his production company that, you know, allowed it to come out and stuff. But this guy, Arnon Milchin, is an Israeli citizen, but he's a Hollywood producer, been a Hollywood producer since the 70s. Produced War of the Roses, Devil's Advocate,
big movies.
A lot of movies that you know. So long story short, he came out and said, I was an Israeli spy for the Israeli intelligence. And Mossad. Yeah, and he had been selling guns around the world, and he said he used his influence in the entertainment industry and to support the apartheid regime in South Africa, so that Israel could buy uranium so they can have nuclear weapons and stuff. So for me, I have to look at every movie that he made again.
Yeah.
Like, what are you saying? Because I know that movies and entertainment and film shape the minds of the people around the world and stuff.
Definitely.
So what are you actually saying? So from when I realized, you did 12 Years a Slave, and then just before then I seen Puff Daddy talking about how I was so inspired to see 12 Years a Slave and this, that, and the other, and I'm like, the next day, and I see this, and I'm like, whoa, dang, what does that mean and stuff, in the whole scope of things and stuff. So, you know, and then looking at that emotional thing like I'm talking about, so oh, okay, you have all these social uprisings and things going on around the world, and then in the States and stuff, you know, it's this thin line between, you know, chaos and, you know what I'm saying?
Broken death.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, I have to look at this guy a whole nother different, and these films a whole other difference and stuff. So I just seen Steve McQueen that says that every black person around the world needs to realize, about slavery or whatnot and stuff, and never forget it or whatnot. Just like how the Jews never forget. I thought it was just ironic that here is this Israeli guy
pushing the stuff,
and then here so it's deep. It's really interesting to me because most people go on emotion and stuff. And they're reactionary and proactive. In the beginning, it's reactionary and stuff. So my best friend is Damian Football Williams and stuff, and he actually was the one that pulled Reginald Denny out of the truck in the LA riots in 1992. I lived on that street. That's my best friend and stuff. I speak to him every day from prison and stuff, And so I seen what emotion can do without no guidance, without no goal, without no...
and if you're told lies, you can be led astray. Right. There's one thing that they never portray, and the 12 years of slavery came close to it, but it's not the fact that black people already existed in the States. That point they never touch.
No, we don't never talk about that and stuff. The majority of black people, they don't know it. They only know it by saying, they have a good hair or something in school and stuff, or they say, my family is mixed with Indian. So, but the implications of it is really true. A lot of us never came from Africa.
No, they were already there.
We was already here, and I'm not saying like Africa is the starting point for everyone.
No.
You know what I'm saying? But I'm saying that a lot of those people that got pulled into slavery was not from Africa.
So you see now, that's another problem. You see, they put these films on, and they do a general sweep with everybody. You were all slaves. But in actual fact, it's not true.
No, it's definitely not true and stuff. But it was a lot of free black men that just got pulled into it because they changed the status of who it was. So when they said you're white, that didn't necessarily mean white people. That meant free people.
That's right.
So you had Moors that was looked at as white. You had, other free men and, Cherokee, different Indian nations that they would go under the status
of Moors,
of white.
And more white.
Moors,
right,
you know what I'm saying?
Vice versa.
Exactly. And stuff, so,
Well, white basically means owner of the land.
So you had black owners, you had, you had Indian owners, or native.
But you know that they basically put a switch on blacks by doing that, by giving them the title of black.
Oh yeah. No,
if you know about Moorish history.
Exactly. No, definitely. I mean, Abraham Lincoln, he was in a case. He was a lawyer and stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with that case and stuff, where this guy that was a Moor wanted to marry this white woman and stuff. He did marry her and stuff. And the brother-in-law of her didn't like it and stuff, so he went around the town spreading like, such and such as a Negro. So Abraham Lincoln defended this Moor. He was a Moor. He wasn't considered a Negro. He was a Moor and stuff. So when he went into court and stuff, he fought for this guy, but under the disguise, he's like, being born with black skin is not a sin. And stuff, and my client is not, a Negro. He's a Moor.
It's a whole different title.
It's a whole different title. You have black skin and everything, but it implies whole different things when it comes to your status and who you are. So
legal
you get labeled under Negro, then or black and stuff. It's like what nation is black? Where's the black nation?
There is none.
What's the black language? You know what I'm saying? What is black food?
It
doesn't exist and stuff. And then you got
we've been saying it loud and proud.
Negro,
black,
but it don't mean nothing.
No.
It doesn't mean nothing. A French person that looks black, won't say that he's black.
No. He's French.
He's French and stuff, Black people in England will say, I'm English.
Yeah. That's right.
Jamaicans gonna say they're Jamaican and stuff. Only in America you say, I'm black, I'm white.
Well, they've trapped the people there in the laws. That's why they've done that. So that they don't know that the land actually belongs to them. And that's what the slave movies hide. You see?
That's right.
Yo, let's just throw your hands in the air and wave them like you just don't care. And if you're ready to rock and it just don't stop, somebody say, oh yeah. Man.
Message.
Today, the state of Israel is every bit the terrorist state that Erdogan and the Stern gang killed to bring into existence. Zionism isn't about self-determination. Zionism is about colonialism, imperialism, and ethnic cleansing. Never let them lie to you. Never let people make you feel ashamed for being an anti-Zionist or for opposing Zionism. On the subject, something interesting about South Africa. Miss Livni, the world-renowned terrorist Miss Livni, recently cancelled her trip to South Africa for fear of being arrested for war crimes. I think that is a victory for everybody in the solidarity movement worldwide. But when we're talking about South Africa, it's debatable what happened after the end of apartheid. But was there ever a point where people said to those resisting apartheid, did they believe that those people who were resisting apartheid out of some type of hatred for European people? Was that ever put forward? Do they believe that the French resistance was resisting the Nazis through some form of hatred for German people? Do we believe that those who opposed the invasion and the occupation of Iraq were opposing that illegal invasion and occupation out of a hatred for American or British people? The answer to all of the above is no. Is no. People oppose imperialism because they refuse to live in humiliation and they want to live with dignity. How much longer do we really expect the Palestinian people to live in humiliation, to daily be degraded and subjugated? How long do we expect these people to live in this way? You see, British soldiers aren't in Palestine. But British money is in Palestine. The Balfour Declaration is in Palestine. All the way from the Balfour Declaration to the Havara Agreement in 1933, there have been numerous dirty, backdoor, shady dealings which have led to the state of things today. Pointing those backdoor dealings out, pointing these injustices out, does not make you anti-Semitic. Israel today is every bit the supremacist state that Theodore Herzl intended it to be. It is a terrorist state, it is a pirate state, and is actually a pariah state in the eyes of most of humanity, with the small exception of the world's most powerful governments. Now this question of anti-Zionism equaling anti-Semitism, does Zionism define who is and who isn't a Semite? No, because Palestinians themselves are Semites. One could argue there's more Semites who are anti-Zionists than Semites who are Zionists. That could very easily be argued. So really that argument is null and void. But the question is, does Zionism define Judaism? Does colonialism define Judaism? Does imperialism define Judaism? Does ethnic cleansing define Judaism? The answer to all of the above is no. If anything, they should call the people who oppose Zionism pro-Semites. Because we don't believe that Zionism defines Jewish people or defines Judaism. At the end of the day, regardless of words that people attach to themselves, whether it be race, religion, or anything else, with this specific situation, there is one line of division. And it's not a line of division between Jewish people and Arab people. It's not a line of division between Jewish people and Muslim people. It's not a line of division between Jewish people and Palestinian people. It's a line of division between those who believe in the equality of all and those who believe in the supremacy of some. This is why we're here. Never let a person make you feel ashamed or afraid to say that you believe in the equality of all people. Never let a person make you feel ashamed for that. So, to wrap everything up, I would like to say thank you for having me, and I'm happy to be a part of this campaign for the simple fact that it shows the people in Palestine, but also the people all around the world, that we as British citizens are willing to fight for them and campaign for them rather than fight against them. Thank you very much.
It's Ken O'Keefe in Gaza. You know, in this Orwellian world of ours, it's oh so nice to have some refreshing honesty, and well, we were watching something really quite interesting yesterday, me and Max.
You know, when I saw this clip yesterday, I thought it was comedy. You know, we all know that there's been false flag events staged right throughout history. It's been replete throughout history. We've had the Lusitania, we've had Gulf of Tonkin, we've had the Maine. These go way back as far as Nero burning Rome. But sometimes you see something and it just boggles the mind. And as I was saying, when I first saw this clip, I had to recheck it actually 3 times just to make sure that it wasn't comedy. I thought I was watching The Onion or something like that. I saw it and I thought, there's no way this can be real. But it turns out that it is real, and we're going to show you this clip and see what you think about this.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Which leads me to conclude that if, in fact, compromise is not coming, that the traditional way of America gets to war is what would be best for U.S. interests. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. One can combine other means of pressure with sanctions. I mentioned that explosion on August 17th. We could step up the pressure. I mean, look, people, Iranian submarines periodically go down. Someday one of them might not come up. Who would know why? We can do a variety of things if we wish to increase the pressure. I'm not advocating that, but I'm just suggesting that this is not a either-or proposition of, you know, it's just sanctions has to succeed or other things. We are in the game of using covert means against the Iranians. We could get nastier at that. I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough.
Crisis initiation? We're trying to initiate crisis?
And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran.
My heart breaks. I know we all want war, and my heart breaks. The president can't get us to war.
Which leads me to conclude that if, in fact, compromise is not coming, that the traditional way of America gets to war is what would be best for U.S. interests.
I don't know. I thought peace and prosperity was good for U.S. interests. Perhaps I'm old-fashioned.
Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II.
Yeah, I thought that. What about you, Ken? Did you think that?
Yeah, I thought that too. Is that why Roosevelt sent all the valuable ships to the West Coast and left all the crappy ones in Pearl Harbor and sacrificed all those sailors? Oh, that's
Must be.
Oh.
As David mentioned, you may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode.
So I guess that's why they sent the Lusitania, which was a passenger ship, into a war zone, packed the hull with explosives, even after they had warnings from the Germans not to send it in there.
Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall we had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode.
Gulf of Tonkin, they made that one up. It didn't even exist. It was just complete fabrication.
We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded.
So it wasn't the Spanish.
And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked.
Makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
Which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack.
As you would. I mean, of course, it supports U.S. policy, doesn't it?
So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war.
Well, after all, a war with Iran is in the American interest, so I think Israel should help us out, eh?
One can combine other means of pressure with sanctions. I mentioned that explosion on August 17th. We could step up the pressure. I mean, look, people, Iranian submarines periodically go down. Someday one of them might not come up. Who would know why? We can do a variety of things if we wish to increase the pressure. I'm not advocating that.
I'm not advocating that. Would you advocate that, Max?
I would never advocate that. Of course, that's probably why they mentioned it.
We wouldn't advocate that.
No, never.
But I'm just suggesting that this is not a either-or proposition. Of, it's just sanctions has to succeed or other things.
Other things? Like everything you just talked about?
We are in the game of using covert means against the Iranians.
It's like chess.
It's just like a game of chess.
Absolutely, that's all it is.
I mean, it's just all life on planet Earth, like, a game of chess.
Yeah, you make a move, that's it.
That's all it is.
That's all it is.
We could get nastier at that.
Yeah, you... Nasty? No, we've only just begun. 9/11, that's just an appetizer.
We're just getting warmed up.
Just getting warmed up.
So, folks, what do you say to a clip like that? Like I said, when I first saw that, I thought it was a comedy routine. I can't believe that they're just out there saying that. They're saying, look, folks, and bear in mind that everything that he just mentioned was a false flag attack. We had to do all of these things, and now we're having lobbies where we're filming it in public and we're telling you what we're going to do. We're saying we're going to stage false flag attacks, folks, and you're not even going to notice because that's what we do now, and you don't notice anyway. So, I mean, it just boggles the mind.
Yeah, Max, and it's like a game, isn't it? It's Zbigniew Brzezinski's grand chessboard. It's just like these people are playing around with us like we're little pawns on a chessboard or something. This is not a game. It is as serious as it gets, and yet these assholes get up as if they own the world, as if we're some inconsequential, non-existent fucking robotic slave class that's just there for, window dressing.
Well, yeah, exactly, window dressing. But the thing that really blows me out is that they're just telling us about it so blatantly. And look, folks, everything they're doing, I mean, the only way it's going to stop is if we do something about it. We have to pay attention to what's going on. We've got to pay attention to what's being said to us. People just aren't paying attention to what's happening in the world. They're not paying attention to what the media is telling them. They're not paying attention to what the politicians are telling them. They're not paying attention to themselves, and they're certainly not paying attention to Gaza. And that's something that very much needs to change.
And let's look at these guys, the Near East studies. Now, if this was just a bunch of, jerk-offs running around with their mouth, then that would be one thing. But these so-called think tanks basically are the formers of policy. Well, let's remember the Project for a New American Century. What did the Project for a New American Century say? They said that ultimately the American people were too fucking stupid to support a global fucking war that would effectively win the empire complete total domination, full spectrum dominance, as they said. That the American people were too stupid, so therefore we needed a, quote, new Pearl Harbor in order for the American people to be whipped up into a policy that would allow us to invade Iraq, invade Afghanistan, and also start a bunch of wars in the Middle East to be able to create that clash of civilization, so whereby we could use all of those billions and billions and billions that we spend on weapons of mass destruction all around the world. Because, hey, you know, if those things are just sitting in a warehouse collecting dust, that's not very good, is it? We got to use those things, don't we?
Yeah, mate, they all cost money. And as I've said so many times before, what we're seeing here, folks, is a breach of trust. Every government in the world is in breach of trust. Every government that supports this is breach of trust. And what we've got to understand is what our relationship with government is, and that is one of fiduciary trust. These are simply trustees that we employ to do a job for us. We employ these people to manage our infrastructure and to ensure that we have peace and prosperity. And here they are saying it's in America's best interests to create war. So what's going on here? What is going on with our system? What is going on is breach of trust. These people are simply public trustees, and they're going to continue doing what they do until we wake up to the power that we have and wake up to what our actual position is in the social hierarchy. Things have to change, and it has to be implemented by us.
Well, that's just it, isn't it, Max? I mean, we talk about breach of trust. This is gross breach of trust, and it's been going on for decades. Actually, it's been going on for centuries, to be honest. Actually, it's been going on even longer than that. These people don't represent our interests. As he says, the American interest, what is the American interest to the Near East Studies Institute? What is the American interest to Project for a New American Century? Is that your interest? Is it my interest? Is it the interest of the working class people who are busting their butts so they can bail out the fucking bankers? Is that the American interest? I don't think so. Again, they're mocking us. And Americans, red-blooded American patriots, think about it. That little podunk country in the Middle East called Israel is our master at this point. America is Israel's bitch, and we're doing basically whatever they want. And only because more Americans are becoming dialed in and becoming a little bit too ashamed of the fact that some little country in the Middle East is telling them what to do. And hopefully the leaders, many of the leaders within the Pentagon and the higher-ups in the military are not down with the program. This is important. If you're a red-blooded American patriot, you better start doing the right thing for the real American interest.
Very true. It has to be looked at, and people have to start paying attention. My friend Ken gets quite angry about this issue, and that isn't surprising. He has a Palestinian wife. He's been to Gaza 3 times, and he's seen the situation that the people are in here. And seeing this clip, they're virtually mocking us, folks. They're just telling us what they're going to do. I mean, hey, I'm not advocating that we do this. I'm just going to come out here as a lobbyist and mention that these are all the things that we have done. Perhaps we could do it again. But, of course, I'm not advocating it. It's about time we wake up to what's going on here, folks. We need to take the power back, and it has to come from the people. It's the only place it can come. There's no good petitioning these people. There's no good lobbying government. There's no good signing forms and voting people in and voting people out. We have to realise where we sit in the food chain. God created man and gave man dominion over the earth. We are mankind. We have dominion over the earth. Governments are our servants, and it's about time we wake up and realise that.
Well, that's right. There is no savior, man. You know, who's the savior? We're the savior. Take a look in the mirror. That's the savior. There's no one coming to save us. Now, let's understand this. This is not a joke. The stakes could not be any higher. This little game with Iran, I think, personally, that the war with Iran would have happened by now. Let us not underestimate the consciousness of humanity is rising. I believe they've done their focus groups. By they, I mean the powers that be. They've done their focus groups, and they realize that people in high ranks may very well break those ranks. And if that happens and the first domino falls, those who are really in power, the ones behind the puppets they put in front of us, that they're going to be the ones who are going to be hanging from lampposts as soon as those people break ranks. So they're afraid. But at the same time, they're afraid and they're dangerous. And let us make no mistake. If you don't know what the Samson option is, I want you to go Google Samson option. The Samson option is what Israel has said publicly on more than one occasion, with the full backing of America, no less. All of those weapons of mass destruction, hundreds of nuclear weapons at Israel's disposal. Israel has said openly that if its existence is threatened, that it will take the whole world down with it, that it will attack Europe, that it will attack the world with nuclear weapons. Now think about it. If they attack Iran and Iran fights back, what are the odds that Iran won't fight back? Of course they will. And when they fight back, they have weapons that can hurt Israel and kill a lot of people. What is Israel going to do then? Is it going to exercise the Samson option? It might very well do that. This could be the end of the world as we know it. It's time to take our heads out of the sand, stop being the proverbial ostrich, and seriously wake up. This is for our children and future generations, that we stop pretending as if we don't live in a world in which we threaten our own existence. We are all one family. We need to start treating each other like brothers and sisters. And those brothers and sisters in our family who are acting like psychopaths and endangering all of us, we need to deal with them. And hopefully we can bring them around. But if they can't be brought around, then they certainly need to be taken out of their positions of power now.
So you've heard about the high cost of Israel to our democratic political process. You'll be hearing much more about the costs Americans have paid for the Israel-U.S. relationship. I'm just going to focus on the dollars and good cents. Americans are concerned about domestic issues as our nation emerges from the 2008 financial crisis. We're worried about unemployment, rising food, fuel, affordable housing, and health care costs. We're also concerned about our aging infrastructure, crumbling roads, bridges, and decaying schools, deteriorating water systems and electrical power grids. Despite our domestic economic fears, Americans are generous. Many of us believe we should help the poor, not just here at home where we have nearly 50 million Americans living in poverty. We also want to give food and medical assistance to help the hungry and vulnerable, especially children, survive conflicts and crises in the developing world. Most Americans would be surprised to see how little foreign aid our country actually gives as a percentage of our gross domestic product when compared with other nations. Foreign aid is only 1% of our federal budget, but in tough economic times like those we are facing today, foreign aid is sometimes considered to be low-hanging fruit, easy to cut, because it does not directly benefit Americans. And we are cutting back on aid compared to previous decades. I challenge American taxpayers to look a lot more closely at who gets $3.1 billion of U.S. foreign aid dollars every year. Do you know that more than 5% of our foreign aid is subsidizing one of the top 10 most powerful nations in the world? Israel, with a population of nearly 8 million people, about the same number of people who live in Hong Kong or New Jersey, is the largest recipient of U.S. foreign aid. And that has been the case for more than a generation. 16 years ago, my dad, Richard Curtis, wrote an article called True Lies About U.S. Aid to Israel for the Washington Report. It could have been written today. Most aid recipients, he said, are developing nations, which either make their military bases available to the U.S. or have suffered some crippling blow to their abilities to feed their people, he said. Israel, whose troubles arise solely from its unwillingness to give back land it seized in the 1967 war in return for peace with its neighbors, does not fit those criteria. Israel tries to give Americans the impression that they are in grave danger. They face annihilation. Their urgent appeals bring in significant charitable contributions, both from well-meaning evangelical Christians and American Jews. Soft-hearted Americans send U.S. tax-deductible donations to 27,000 nonprofit organizations in order to help the needy, including Jewish immigrants and Israeli soldiers. Who knew that we could get a tax write-off by sending pizzas and sodas to Israeli soldiers in tanks and at checkpoints? Birthright Israel sends 37,000 young Jewish people on free 10-day trips to Israel each year. Wealthy Americans donate $660 million a year for these trips, and the students are not permitted to travel to the West Bank, Gaza, or East Jerusalem. Does Israel really need our handouts? Let's compare Israel's economy to other countries. Israel's 2013 per capita gross domestic product was $34,900. That put it below Britain at $37,300 and France at $35,700 and just above the EU at $34,500. According to the National Power Index, Israel's army ranks 6th in the world. Israel has nuclear weapons, unlike any of its neighbors. Israel ranks 4th in technological capacity and is among the world's leaders in science. According to Haaretz, Israel's unemployment rate is 6.2%, while America's is 7%, and Europe's average unemployment is 12%. Israel ranks 15 on the UN Development Index, illustrating the high quality of life for Jews living in Israel. Israelis can expect to live until they're 81.8, and Americans' life expectancy is 78.6. Israel's state-funded health care is ranked 4th in the world, and the U.S. is in the bottom of Bloomberg's list of 48 countries. As I mentioned, Israel receives more than $3.1 billion in direct foreign assistance each year, which is roughly 1/5 of Americans' entire foreign aid budget. U.S. Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel recently promised that this aid would not be reduced, even while he listed significant cuts to America's defense budget. In fact, in June 2013, the House Armed Services Committee voted to give Israel an extra $500 million in military aid for missile interception systems. President Barack Obama boasts that the U.S. has never given so much military aid to Israel as under his presidency. Cheryl MacArthur, the Washington Report's Congress Watch expert, tallies up U.S. aid to Israel for our magazine. As a conservative, defensible accounting of U.S. direct aid to Israel, MacArthur's estimate does not include the costs resulting from the U.S. invasion and occupation of Iraq. Hundreds of billions of dollars, which many believe to have been undertaken for the benefit of Israel. For the year 2014, Israel has received $3.4 billion from the foreign aid budget and $2 billion in federal loan guarantees. That's $9,315,068 per day, 365 days a year. If you add grants and loans, Israel has received since 1949 a grand total of $134.21 billion, excluding the $10 billion in U.S. government loan guarantees it's drawn to date. And Cheryl MacArthur's calculations are modest. A respected economist, Dr. Thomas Stauffer, estimated that Israel cost the U.S. about $1.6 trillion between 1973 and 2003 alone, more than twice the cost of the Vietnam War. And that's not all. Israel gets some unique benefits. Washington has granted Israel $19 billion in loan guarantees in recent years to make it easier to borrow overseas. Israel gets its aid money at the start of each year, unlike other nations. This means Israel can start earning interest on the money right away, and the U.S. government, which operates at a deficit, must borrow the money to pay Israel and then pay interest on the amount all year long. Israel can use 25% of U.S. aid to buy arms from Israeli companies. Congressional legislation requires us to maintain Israel's qualitative military edge. That means anytime another country in the Middle East buys U.S. arms, we have to make sure Israel gets better weapons. We regularly transfer surplus military equipment to Israel. Israel is now storing equipment worth more than $1.2 billion. Well, America also gives $1.5 billion to Egypt's 85 million people. Well, actually, most of that goes directly to Egypt's military for meeting its obligations under the 1979 Egypt-Israel Peace Treaty. Jordan's 6.5 million people get $660 million a year for keeping peace with their neighbor. Aid to Israel is a subject that rarely makes it into the mainstream media. We were stunned when Walter Pincus, who reports on intelligence, defense, and foreign policy for the Washington Post, tackled this normally unmentionable subject. Days after Israel's cabinet cut nearly $2 million from Israel's own defense budget, on October 18, 2011, Pincus pointed out, if Israel can reduce its defense spending because of domestic economic problems, shouldn't the United States, which must cut military costs because of its major budget deficit, consider reducing its aid to Israel? I'd like to conclude by stating the obvious. The U.S. President and Congress give aid to Israel for domestic reasons, in order to please Jewish and evangelical Christian voters who are often more pro-Israeli than Israelis. It is mind-boggling that when it comes to Israel, U.S. taxpayers' largesse has no preconditions. Israel has a green light to use American tax revenue for military operations, which destroy Palestinian or Lebanese roads, water tanks, sewage lines, electrical power plants, and police stations, not to mention shops, homes, schools, orchards, and lives. Sometimes Israel demolishes projects like parks, playgrounds, ports, and other vital infrastructure paid for by American taxpayers and donors. It's past time to halt U.S. aid until Israel complies with UN resolutions, withdraws from the occupied territories, and makes peace. According to surveys, a growing number of Americans want Israeli aid levels the same, reduced, or canceled. With the prospect of prolonged fiscal austerity in the United States, overall American public support for foreign aid may diminish in the years ahead. Economic conditions in the United States should affect future aid to Israel. Cutting off aid to Israel is the logical and economical and ethical thing for Americans to do. Thank you.
The book, The Third Eye, is it is parallel to reality, our reality, that these things will they come to pass?
Well, let me put it like this. The universal language globally around the entire world is mathematics. And that's why people buy my book. I have not gotten any translations yet. The book is in English, but it's selling around the entire world, and people are buying it. Now, I have had people from France, they want a translation, so people who cannot speak English or write English, they want the book in French. Peru, my book is sold even in Peru. The Peruvians want it in Spanish. The Italians, Italy, they want it in Italian. So I am telling you that I am the real writer of The Matrix and Terminator, and I have the books to prove it. Lots of great, phenomenal movie franchises come from books. The Wachowskis just told all of you guys a blatant lie. They have never written anything. And no one can sit up there and brag about they wrote The Matrix and Terminator and never can continue the work or never be on any talk shows, major talk shows explaining the work, and it's buying other people's work, other people's book. Cloud Atlas is David Mitchell's work, and they crashed it. Didn't even make $4 million. Speed Racer is the Japanese writer's work from the 60s.
Yes.
Crashed it. V for Vendetta is the English writer Alan Moore's work. And these people have books. You cannot sit up there and say you wrote The Matrix and go out and buy other people's books to rewrite into a script. This doesn't make any sense. To adapt other people's work. If you wrote The Matrix or Star Wars, you would continue the work. The work is great.
Is a Star Wars as well connected into the storyline? Is a Star Wars line as well? Is there something with this timeline as well?
It's no Star Wars line. A lot of the fans try to say it seems to them like Star Wars, but my work is greater than Star Wars.
Okay.
It's greater than Star Wars. Star Wars is the wars in heaven, and what Lucas wrote was the point of view of Satan. How Darth Vader, the devil, fell from the light to the dark. That is the opposite of the Matrix and Terminator series. Star Wars is the opposite, like polarity, polar. Polar opposite. It's polar opposite. They're not anything alike. They're polar opposites. Because Lucas is talking about Darth Vader. Darth Vader is the devil. He sits in his interviews and he explains to people that is how the devil fell from the light to the darkness. How Star Wars are the wars in heaven. That's what Star Wars means. That there was a great war in heaven. And Darth Vader fell.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Star Wars is about. My story, my work is about the second coming.
Yes.
Evolution, ascending, what ascension means. It's all quantum physics.
Quantum physics.
It is mathematics.
Mathematics. The matrix. The womb.
That's right. If you Google the King James's Bible, you will see that matrix is mentioned 5 times in there. That the Wachowski brothers didn't even know what matrix meant. They had never read the King James's Bible. They had never read the Bible. When people asked them, where did you get matrix from? They said they saw a lot of kung fu fighting. The kung fu fighting comes from me. That fighting I had initiated in science fiction, in other stories, when all people before that was only doing martial arts fighting in martial arts movies. But I was growing up in Times Square, me and my girlfriend, who was half Japanese and half black, we would sneak off to Times Square and we would look at the Bruce Lee's movies, and we would look at the real Hidden Dragons and Crouching Tigers. We would look at the real Japanese martial art movies. I myself have native blood. My grandmother is full-blooded native. That's where I get the gift of second sight from.
Okay.
And my father is Spanish, Portuguese. But that's where I get the gift of second sight from my grandmother.
Let me think. Second sight. That so the inspiration comes to you, and then you write.
That's where the vision comes.
A vision.
Visionary.
It's a vision.
Visionary.
Okay.
That's right. It's where I get my visionary skills from. Is my grandmother being full-blooded Cherokee.
And yeah, that's also interesting. The bloodlines or something. Reminds me of the bloodlines of people that are different. So a line coming from Spain, and I think of Al-Andalus.
Yes, it does. From my father, Spain, the Portuguese, Portugal, Spain, and the House of Stewart. There are no accidents, no mistakes.
Yes.
There are no accidents, no mistakes. My name being Stewart. The House of the Stewarts were the Highlanders. And the Jacobites wars were all about in King James's Bible, when they were fighting, because they had the bloodline from Spain. The Hanovers, the Tudors, right now in England is the German blood. They killed the Mary Queen of Scots to keep that bloodline, that Spanish bloodline, from being on the throne, because King James and King Charles were kings of England. They were the kings of England at one point in history. But this is where the Scottish and the Highlanders come in, and all this fighting in Portuguese and Spain. And a lot of people don't even see that connection. I'm just quite amazed that you are able to see the connections. King James Stewart had a daughter named Sophia Stewart. So my name is ancient.
Yes.
It's an ancient name.
Let me think. What I think about now is so the Spanish connection is also the Moorish connection, right?
Yes, indeed.
From North Africa
and Spain.
That's deep.
Well, the Moors.
Now we are in Old Cairo. I have my iPad out and I'm taking notes of everything. I'm truly impressed with my wife's drive as she helps us embark upon this extremely important task. We are on a spiritual sojourn right here at St. Marcus Church. There's a lot of historical information here, so we couldn't just come looking for pyramids. I also want to investigate the monotheistic religions. As they say in Egypt, Egypt is no stranger to God. Now, our first stop is the Hanging Church. It is also referred to as the Suspended Church, or El Moalaka. It's called the Hanging Church because it was built on the southern gate of the Roman fortress, or as some say, a cliff. There's a great deal of history here. Let's go inside and find out. Patriarch, or they say Patriarch. Instead of P, they say B. Oh, wow. Wow, as in the first. And then they would call him Marcus. Right? El Rasul. So the messenger. But pronounce the P as a B when you see it. Check right here, the guy sitting in the seat. It's King Farouk. And it's interesting because you see like they have the headdresses look like the Moors. Right?
Message. I like messing with Christians, man. Because they easy to get. You can get on their skin quick, you know. You know, I tell a Christian in a minute, I say, I don't believe Jesus died on no cross. Sacrilege. I said, well, wait a minute. He could walk on water, feed 1,000 with a loaf of bread, raise the dead. But you telling me this nigga couldn't handle 3 nails. I know brothers with 9 bullet wounds still walking around. His name is 50 Cent. You telling me 50 Cent colder than Jesus? Maybe you delusional motherfucker. I bet you Jesus was a cool kid. His mama be like, now Jesus, go on in there and take a bath and don't be walking on your water. And then, that's probably why they invented the shower, just to get the nigga wet. Look at some of the Christian heads in here. You going to hell. Don't be talking about Jesus, Eddie. Don't be talking about it. You know how Jesus whistled? You know, with the hole in the hand. Look, y'all really like, nigga, that's it. The lightning's coming. Christian always the first one want to send somebody to hell. You going to hell. How the fuck you know? Like God came down, let that nigga know he going to hell. I'm kind of busy right now. You know what I mean? I made my Heavenly Father's image. If I got a sense of humor, that means God got one. God probably up there cracking up right now. Hey, Jesus, come here. That crazy nigga I made his own. He talking about you, boy. He said you walk on your back walk. He said you whistle like this. I don't get mad, nigga. That shit was funny. That shit was funny.
That he is one of the mightiest messengers of God, we believe. Jesus. We believe in his miraculous birth, which many modern day Christians, including the bishops of the Anglican Church, they don't believe today, but we believe that Jesus Christ was born without a human father. Miracle of God's creation. We believe. We believe that he was the Messiah, translated Christ. We believe he gave life back to the dead, bi-iznillah, by Allah's permission. And he healed those born blind and the lepers by Allah's permission. Can't you see? This is our attitude towards this mighty messenger of God. And this mighty messenger of God, Jesus Christ, I don't know if I tell you that his name occurs in this book of mine, our book, the Quran, 500% more time than the name Muhammad. Did you know that? You Muslims, do you know that the name Jesus occurs in our book 500% more times? than the name Muhammad. Did you know that? Did you know that? Not likely. 500% more times. The Jesus, son of Mary, Ibn Maryam, Isa ibn Maryam, 500% more times than the name Muhammad. Muhammad is supposed to have written this book. It is alleged that he wrote the book. Amazing. This author himself, he keeps himself out of the book. And he promotes Jesus. Amazing, amazing, amazing book. Now, let me tell you. Mary, the mother of Jesus, is mentioned in the first 3 books of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark and Luke, 17 times. You can remember that now. 17 times. And in the next 24 books of the New Testament, once. Total 18. Word Mary occurs in the New Testament 18 times. In this Quran of mine, Mary, the mother of Jesus, is mentioned 100% more times than in your Bible. Can you believe it? Is it believable? Mary, the mother of Jesus, is mentioned in my book 100% more times than in your book. And you think that we are the enemies. Actually 32. Actually 32. It's almost 18 times 2 is 36, this is 32. It's near enough. I said 100% more times. It's like a figure of speech, but 32 times as against 18. This is the relationship. And there is a chapter in the Quran in honor of the name of the mother of Jesus Christ. The name of the chapter is Surah Maryam, meaning chapter Mary. In your Bible, of the Roman Catholic 73 books, Mary is not one of them. In your Protestant Bible, 66 books, Mary is not one of them. You have Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Peter, Paul. Mary is not one of them. Admit it is not there. In my book is enshrined Surah Maryam with the greatest respect in honor of the name of the mother of Jesus Christ. There is a chapter in the Quran. And you consider us to be the enemies. No. Are we trying to be funny? No.
Welcome, thoughtful viewers. Today we will present the first of a 2-part series featuring an interview with American monk, Zen priest, and author Dr. Stephen Harefield. Earlier in his life, Dr. Harefield had served in the army and experienced the suffering of war. As a soldier, he came to Olac, Vietnam. There, his search for inner peace and wisdom guided him to a Buddhist Zen monastery in Quang Dai province. The monks in this Zen monastery revealed that there are Buddhist scriptures which describe a prophet named Isa, who came from the West to live in India. Dr. Harefield realized that this Isa must be the Jesus Christ. After Dr. Harefield came back to the United States, he earned a degree in psychology and later a master's degree in religion and theology and a doctorate in metaphysics. Afterwards, following his inner urge, Dr. Harefield traveled to India, Nepal, and Tibet, where he was guided by Buddhist lamas on his own spiritual journey and a quest to understand the real master, Jesus.
When I found myself in northern India and encountered probably 2 of the finest people, even to this day, that I've ever met, my teachers, they told me I was in India for 2 reasons. Was to learn the Tibetan philosophy and ideas, and then to share them with my part of the world. And the second reason why I was there is they wanted me to know about Isha. Of course, at that moment in time, I had never heard that name before. But the interesting thing is they are the same people. Isha is Jesus in Hindi, in the far eastern part of the world. The ironic thing is that name originated out of India, but it's also, there's Lake Isha in Nepal. The name is known in Tibet. The name is also known in what we call Iran today. It was Persia back then, and it's known also a good portion of the Orient. I spent 6 years of my life studying with the Tibetans. They are meticulous record keepers. They have a contiguous, touching records of every great master that has ever been in that part of the world. They literally have scribes, secretaries, basically, that write down everything they say. No one can sit anywhere and tell me that Buddha wrote down the sutras. He didn't. Someone else did. And the same is true with Christ. Now, if you were to go into one of the monasteries, I can tell you without hesitation that it is in, and it's the first place I saw them, the documents, is the Hemis Monastery in Ladakh, which is one of the states of northern India. If you were to walk in there and say, I would like to see the scrolls of about Isha, they would look at you and say they don't exist. But if you were to go there and they trust in you and they like you and they understand that you're not there to dispel, they would walk up to you and say, your Isha was here. And what Kaila did, who was my abbot, my lama, is he told the abbot of that monastery why I was there. That I was there to study Isha and what he was doing there, what he was learning, what he was being taught. And the abbot of that monastery scurried off. He brought several scrolls back with him, and Kaila got an interpreter, and the interpreter read the Sanskrit words to me.
In 1894, Russian journalist Nicholas Notovich was the first to publish a translation of the Buddhist manuscripts which describe Jesus' life in India in his book, The Unknown Life of Jesus. Another well-known personality who wrote about Jesus living in India was Swami Abhedananda, who was president of the Vedanta Society in New York. Dr. Harefield is only the 18th person and the second American who has ever been allowed to read the precious documents.
And that's how I made the connection, because when they said to me, your Jesus was here, this was his name. Now, I was raised as Catholic. I was stunned. My first inclination was, no way.
Dr. Harefield found that Jesus studied in India with teachers of the Jain faith, as well as with Hindu Brahmins, and later with Buddhist teachers in North India and Nepal.
Dr. Harefield, are there biblically recorded statements that can be compared to the Buddha?
Oh, totally. There are over 1,000. What you sow, so shall you reap, was something that the Christ was taught, that Buddha also taught. So there's a direct correlation right there. But even when you look at the 7 points of the Sermon on the Mount, all of them echo precisely what the Buddha himself said. But there are so many that predate the Christ that to me verify that he had to be in Buddha's neighborhood, so to speak, to even learn them without hesitation, without question. But yeah.
How did you know that Jesus had dwelled in the land of elephants and tigers?
It's pretty obvious once my teachers began showing me the documents and what he was studying, and it's interesting too that he wasn't there by himself, by the way. It was Jesus, Mary Magdalene, John the Baptist, and Thomas. And Christianity on the east coast of India, they actually follow Thomas. They're Thomasines, not followers of Christ. They were all four there learning the same information.
When we return, we will hear more from Dr. Harefield about Jesus' secret life in India. Please stay tuned to Supreme Master Television. Welcome back to a journey through aesthetic realms. Today with American author and Zen priest Dr. Stephen Harefield about Jesus' life in India. According to Dr. Harefield, the three wise men from the East, which are mentioned in the Gospels, the biblical books about Jesus, are actually sages who came in search of a newborn enlightened soul in Palestine. This was similar to the way in which nowadays Buddhist monks search for the incarnations of previous lamas.
The reason they showed up, oh, by the way, following a wandering star, we have a star defying the laws of physics. No, what they were following was an astrological prediction, a Vedic astrological prediction. Vedic astrology comes out of India. They came from the East. Why? To confirm whether this was the great soul that they were to teach. The three gifts were gifts of wisdom, compassion, and love.
They're symbolic gifts.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Once they confirmed that the Christ was who he was, they left specific instructions to Joseph and Mary that there were certain things that they had to do as he grew. One was go to the mystery schools at Heliopolis in Egypt, so that when he came out of Egypt, it met that prophecy that this person would be coming out of Egypt. He did. When Christ was 13, they had to meet this third criteria with the instructions that were left, that Christ was to go into India.
So there's a direct correlation with fulfilling these prophecies.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Was it true that you retraced St. Isa's steps, his path?
Parts of it, absolutely. I actually sat in a cave in Nepal on the shores of Lake Isha, where the Christ supposedly had spent over a month doing nothing but meditating in.
Well, what was Jesus' purpose? What was his mission here?
In the world? Well, it's totally different than what we've been taught. He was a great master, extremely accomplished. But that level of knowledge was only located in that part of the world. If you think about it, the Tibetans still follow a similar tradition today. They seek out the reincarnated Dalai Lama, and when they locate him, they test him. He passes the test, they begin grooming him to be the next Dalai Lama. The 14th Dalai Lama is the one that we know today, and he had to go through all of that. They did the same thing with the Christ. So he was taught what he knew.
While staying in monasteries in India, Tibet, and Nepal, Dr. Harefield had the opportunity to study the same ancient Indian scriptures which Jesus had studied 2,000 years before, and to compare their message with Jesus' teachings as conveyed by the Gospels of the Bible.
If you studied the principles of karma, the 12 principles, he actually says the same thing in the 4 Gospels. He just changes the wording of it. He says it exactly in this manner: whatever you mete returns to you tenfold. Mete meaning whatever you put forth. And something that confirms totally, because this statement is written in the Vedas, and he quotes it exactly. What you sow, so shall you reap. That's the prime or great law of karma. That's the very first law to go by. And then he begins to explain the other ones in the, quote, different parabolic phrases that he states, but he goes through literally all 12 of them in the New Testament. You'll find the Vedic text in the 4 Gospels. You'll find the Jain texts. You'll find the Brahmin text, and you'll find the Buddhist text. And I actually sat down with all of those texts, one beside the other, and began mixing and matching and finding the same exact ideas. So I know where he got them. I know where they came from. Absolutely. It's open to anybody if they open their mind. You see, we're taught that we can't do any of this. We're taught that we are not worthy to do it. You never heard Christ say that himself. You've never heard, even in the Bible, God say that. The biggest key in any of that is just simply accepting yourself for who you already are. And then, well, like it says in the Nagamari, when you make the 2 into 1, you can say, mountain, move from here to there, and it will be given you. The question is what does that mean? It means actually several things. Two means duality. There is no duality in the world. There is no duality in life. There is no duality in consciousness. There is only one consciousness. And we are living points in that. So there's one. The second is by allowing our souls to have a say in our lives. In other words, we live through our soul, not just our body. So now it's removing duality and having the soul and the body as one operating principle. And then you can do anything he did. He said so himself.
Thank you, open-minded viewers, for your company today on a journey through aesthetic realms.